Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Swain. I'm with Epic Realty here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I want to welcome you to our investor education webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the 7 red flags that make me personally walk away from an investment property. This is designed to be a practical, fun guide to knowing what a deal is worth. And the idea is either we chase it, we renegotiate it, or we leave it alone. And a lot of times you'll see these are the reasons why we will leave it alone. So let's get started here. So I want you to understand not every cheap property is a good deal. Okay. A low price can be an opportunity. It can also be a warning label. And one of the biggest traps we see in real estate investing is confusing a low price with a good deal. Now, a property can be cheap for a reason. And sometimes that reason is fixable, sometimes it's manageable, and sometimes that reason is just the reason why you walk away. It'll that reason may be quietly waiting to destroy your budget, your timeline, and sometimes your sleep. So what you're going to learn today, really simple, how experienced investors evaluate risk and why some properties are cheap for a reason. The red flags that can destroy a deal, when you should renegotiate, and when you should walk away. And I want to be clear, this is not about being afraid of problems. Real estate investing is problem solving, but there's a big difference between a problem that you can price in and a problem you just don't understand yet. And if I can't understand the risk, I can't price the deal. And if I can't price the deal, I don't have a deal. I just have a guess. And guesses are gambling. And we don't gamble, we're investors, right? So before we get into the 7 red flags, this is the rule that governs everything. If you can't understand the risk, you can't price the deal. And some investors, they lose money because they just get emotionally committed to making the numbers work and they want the property. And wouldn't this be cool if we had this? And ultimately, if you don't evaluate risk properly, you have a problem. And that problem is guessing, and it's gonna catch up with you either on the first deal or maybe the 10th deal from now. But guessing is a recipe for failure. And one of the things you want to understand is bad deals almost always look good at first. The price is attractive, the seller's motivated, and the property is like, you know, awesome. And then you look at the foundation, or you look at something and it's like, oh God, this is not what I think it was. And oh my gosh, what did I do? And the goal ultimately is not to fall in love with the upside before you understand the downside. One of the first red flags that I have with any property I look at as an investment is foundation problems. Now, not every crack is a disaster. Older homes move, they settle, but significant stair step cracks, bowing walls, sloping floors, doors that don't close, windows that are messed up, water intrusion, it's going to make me slow down and evaluate and look at this whole thing, get an expert involved. And typically what I look, you typically look for is bowing basement walls, those cracks I mentioned, sloping floors, doors and windows out of square, any water entering the foundation, and then, attempts to make prior repairs. So I had one that was looking at that somebody took, like, just looked like mortise, like compound cement, and tried to repair a crack, right? So it was like you knew about the problem, you tried to repair it. So those are the things I look for. So the foundation, when the foundation risk is unclear, I walk. And those one of the things to keep in mind with any of these that we talk about specific problems is I am not a foundation expert, but I know enough that I can see if something's going to be a problem, and potentially need to get somebody else involved to look at it. Not all foundation problems are deal breakers, but the risk has to be clear. We need to know exactly what we're getting into, and we need to know what we're dealing with, and ultimately if we can repair it. Relating to the foundation, water always wins. Water and fire are the most destructive things on earth, and water's patient, it's persistent, and it's expensive. Talk to anyone who has had a flooded basement. It's a nightmare for most people. And so water problems always need to be looked at. Now, you can tell if something smells musty in the basement. If there's fresh paint in one suspicious area, maybe they had a leak in the roof. Always ask about that. Stained ceilings, issues with the basement walls, maybe some mildew on the basement walls, soft subfloors, spongy subfloor, and a gutter near the foundation that's just dumping into the foundation. And ultimately negative grading. If the water isn't being pushed away or running out from that under the house, it's going to be running in. So you want to have that negative grading, that slope there. I walk when the water source is unknown. So if I just have mystery water, visible water, and I don't know where it came from, well, that's not something I want to figure out after I buy it. That's something I got to figure out now. So we always make an effort to find the source of the water. But and normally it's bad gutters, roof leaks, grading, all that stuff. But if I can't determine where the water's coming from, I walk. Next, a floor plan that fights you. Okay. Some properties are functionally obsolete. If I'm walking through a bedroom to get to a living room, or the one bathroom I have is in the primary and there's no other bathrooms. If, my kitchen is a galley kitchen that's in between a living room and a bedroom, these things happen, right? We live in a world, especially in Cincinnati here, that sometimes things get pieced together. And so they may look great from the outside, but you get in and you're like, how is someone going to live here? So these layout problems can hurt resale. Now they're fixable. Sometimes knocking a wall down, making a different entrance, things like that are doable. But stuff like bedrooms that are only accessible through other bedrooms, tiny kitchens. Nobody wants to buy a home unless they're a single person living alone in an efficiency cottage. Nobody wants to buy a home that has a super tiny kitchen, right? That they can't expand, they can't really work in, right? Now, one bathroom in a larger family home, if you have a 3-bedroom home and one bathroom, it just makes logical sense that, you're going to have some issues there. No true primary bedroom. Now, sometimes, especially on the west side of starter homes and stuff, they won't have a true primary. Those are things that we can work around. But ultimately, people nowadays, they want a nice primary bedroom with their own bathroom, right? A private bathroom. And these are things that you can sometimes expand upon the current layout and build out, knock a wall down, stuff like that. But there are other times where it's not a viable situation. Like if I, had something on the east side in a nicer home and there wasn't a primary bedroom, but instead there was like a 4-bedroom, might knock a wall down to make a primary and make it a 3-bedroom. Low ceiling height nowadays, uh, the more we see people wanting these vaulted ceilings, these higher ceilings, weird additions, things that just don't fit in the plan, that can't be easily corrected. And then poor flow from room to room. This is, like a bathroom that can't be accessible by not going through another bedroom, things like that. I'll walk away when a layout problem is impossible to ignore. So a lot of layout problems can be fixed. But if it's just impossible, if it's just weird, if there's no exit, right? I'll just walk. So another red flag, number 4 here, is when a house comes with paperwork problems, right? So some of the most expensive problems that are not visible are with the title, right? And unclear ownership. The person bought it through a quit claim deed and they bought it in a company and maybe they're a member of the company, maybe they're not. These are things you got to work out. Probate complications, if I can talk here, probate complications. Say that the grandmother passed and she has 5 grandchildren and 4 out of the 5 agree to sell the home. The other one has an issue with the will and wants to contest it. And you love the house, you're going to buy it, but all of a sudden there's a court case that's attached to it that needs to be resolved before you can take possession. These are things that you got to take into consideration. Unreleased mortgages, if there's encumbrance on the property, and typically a title search will find most of these, and then it's working back to see if you can get them cleared. Tax liens, same thing. Title searches will look for tax liens, mechanics liens. These are things that the title company ultimately will be responsible if you get title. I recommend anyone get title insurance on these properties that they buy, so you're covered, so you have clear and marketable title. Another thing, though, that title doesn't cover is code violations. So you should always, especially if you buy in the city of Cincinnati, is look up any code violations you have on Cages and see if there are any. And we've had properties before that had demolition orders that people are trying to sell, and it's like, we need to sell this because the city's going to knock it down soon. I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to buy a home that has a target on it. So you're going to want to verify with the city that those code violations, and then ultimately open permits are not out there, and that you can get this house and be clear about the standing with the city on it. I walk away. One of the things I walk away, most things that can be fixed, but I will walk away when clear ownership is unclear. So clean ownership needs to be clear. It needs to be, the person selling it to me needs to have clear, marketable title, verified person. If I cannot safely buy it, I do not have an investment. I have a problem, and therefore I do not go for it. I walk away. Next one, and very common. This is like the most common thing I see with real estate investors is spreadsheet magic. And this is where the deal only works with perfect assumptions. So, for instance, if you have, underestimation of repairs, oh, that roof is only going to cost, $8,000 because I got a buddy down the street and he does roofs and I can get him a 12 pack of beer and $8,000 and he can do it. It's not a real repair estimate. That's a buddy down the street that you could work with. Um, Overestimating ARV. After repair value is 500,000 for this $150,000 house, and you only have to put 50 grand into it. Nobody in their mind is going to pay 500K for a home that you just bought for 150 and put 50 grand into. It just does not make sense. So overestimating ARV is a very common thing for people wanting to sell um, these investment properties. Ignoring holding costs. Everybody has holding costs. If you're going to a hard money lender and he's charging you 12, 15%, and he expects to get paid and you have to pay the interest, ignoring this could get you into trouble. Also, not a lot of people think about it, but taxes, insurance, utility costs, that all has to be incorporated into your holding costs. So you have to account for those. Again, forgetting utilities, insurance, and taxes, those are holding costs. Assuming no surprises. So a lot of real estate investors, they factor in 20, 30% even to accommodate for those surprises. You take a window off of something and you run into a problem where you all of a sudden see asbestos and you have to remove that. These surprises you have to account for and try to make known before you get into it. And then assuming instant resell some of these properties, we do not live in the same market as we did 5 years ago when properties, as soon as they hit the market, were selling within 30 days. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So you need to account for holding costs when it comes to resell. And then lastly, using best case comps. Sometimes when they use comps, they utilize, maybe a comp that's not arm's length, or a comp that is not comparable to the home that you have and you're trying to resell. So we always want to utilize a very broad number of comps in order to get real world idea of what the property is sell for. Another thing too is, you want to use current comps. Comps 10 years ago, 5 years ago are not really comps. So I walk when there's no margin for error. So if my you know, my margin for error is little to none. I know that in real estate investing, there's always going to be something. So if there's no margin for error, I walk. Um, and, look, missing out on the deal can sometimes be annoying. It can be a letdown, but buying a bad deal is worse than missing out on a good deal or any deal. Um, red flag number 6, the process feels off. You know, sometimes the property's not the red flag, the situation is. So, hey, the seller refuses inspections, but it's a great deal. You would walk. Inconsistent answers about the property. If they don't allow you to access certain sections of the property, that's a problem. Pressure and rush to close. They want to get out of it. They need to get out of it as soon as possible. You have to question why do they want to get out of it quick. Squatters, occupants that do not leave could be a problem. You have to maybe give them cash for keys to leave. Locked rooms, missing keys, and then trust me, replacing documentation. I do not um, take I take into consideration a lot of these, but trust me is one of those red flags that I just walk away from because people lie, and the numbers don't. So essentially, you want to get rid of any. You do not want to move forward if someone just says trust me and doesn't provide you documentation. So if I cannot complete basic due diligence on the property, I cannot inspect it and I cannot price it. So if we can't complete due diligence, we walk. I always like to say, what if there's an atomic bomb in the basement that I can't get to? What if there is, a grow room with illegal drugs in the attic that you won't let me in? I'm not going to buy a problem that I can't see. In order to be able to inspect something and do due diligence, I need to be able to see it. So if I can't see it, I walk. Red flag number 7 is the exit. If you can honestly look at a property and say, I don't really know who I'm going to sell this to, you need to walk because you need to have an idea as to your ideal buyer, right? If this property is only a good investment, this property is only a good investment if there's a clear exit. If it's too unique for the buyer pool, if it's in a bad location with limited demand, say for instance, you're in an area that this is the only tutor on the street, everybody else is modern, and it's sticking out like a sore thumb, you might have a bad location for a tutor. And there may be limited demand for a tutor in that area, as well as if it's an area that has a lot of colonial looking properties and you have a modern mid-century, you may be in a bad location. That's it could be a hard to finance property, maybe a multifamily that's deteriorating, that's in a bad area. There's no comparables. Ultimately, if you have an unclear end buyer, you probably shouldn't be making that investment. So when the exit depends on hope, I hope I find a buyer, we walk. Um, the exit strategy should always be clear before the purchase. You have to plan the exit at the purchase. You don't know where you should start if you don't know what your destination is. Like imagine getting into a car and driving to Florida, but not knowing if you're going to Miami or you're going to Jacksonville. There's a pretty big difference between Miami and Jacksonville. You need to know where you're going as soon as you start the journey. Now, I want to be completely clear. A red flag does not always mean no. It means pause, verify, and price the risk. For instance, if I have an encumbrance on a property, I find out that that person has a lien against the property, okay? And that lien is X amount of dollars. Well, that's risk that I can evaluate, right? That means if I'm buying something for 200K and that's a $5,000 lien, I know that that lien has to be settled in order to buy the property, and that's a $5,000 risk, right? Similarly, if I have a leaky roof and the problem is the leaky roof, and I call a roofer and he comes out and he gives me an estimate and says it's $10,000 to fix the roof. But after he fixes the roof, the leak's going to be taken care of. Well, the red flag was the roof leaking and the water intrusion and stuff, but I can fix it with 10 grand. So that's the price of the risk. You have to look at, okay, this is the problem, this is how you fix it, and this is the price that is attached to fixing it and assuming that risk. Ultimately, as real estate investors, we are problem solvers. We solve problems that others don't, and we profit off of them. So my 3 questions I often ask before buying: do I understand the risk? Meaning, have I properly evaluated this property? Have I had inspections? Have I had good due diligence? Second is, can I price the risk? Can I put a price tag on how much it would be to fix, right? Hey, it's got a foundation problem, but if I put X amount of dollars into it, that's fixed, right? And ultimately, is there enough profit left after the risk? I mean, if you stuck to these 3 principles, understand, price, and see if there's enough margin, you would do well at real estate investing. Those 3 principles are key. We need to ultimately decide when we find something that's an issue with the property. Do we proceed, meaning the risk is understood and priced? Do we renegotiate, meaning the risk is real, but it's manageable at a lower number? Or do we walk away, meaning the risk is unclear, it's uncontrolled, or too large? Meaning, for instance, if I have a $200,000 property that's going to take $300,000 to repair, and I'm only going to get $400,000 off of it, $500,000 out of it, would I walk away? Probably, right? Because the risk is too large, the cost is too large in order to make that deal work. The best deal is sometimes the one you do not buy. So you make money by buying right. You protect money by walking away. So sometimes the best deal is not buying it, right? You have to look at this from a risk perspective, okay? Is it a better deal not to buy it, or is it a better deal to buy it? It's a simple question. And you evaluate the risk based on the issues, the red flags, all these things. And then ultimately the goal is to make more than you spend and to have margin there and to make profit. A good investor knows what to buy, but a better investor knows what to avoid. And ultimately, the investor relies on professionals in the industry to guide them and to mentor them as to what looks good, what doesn't look good. And if you're looking to properly evaluate an investment property here in the Cincinnati area, I would love to help you. I can help you review the purchase price, repair risk, resale potential, rental potential, exit strategy, and red flags before you commit. I work with investors that are into multifamily, single family homes, even warehouses, office buildings, and I help them properly underwrite and evaluate so that they know whether or not they're getting into something that has a managed risk and also enough margin to make it worth their time. And look, I work with people with no pressure, no hype. Just a practical look at whatever the opportunity, if the opportunity makes sense, or ultimately if it doesn't. So again, my name is Chris Swain. I'm with Epic Realty here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I would love to talk with you if you're considering buying an investment property, if you're evaluating one, or you just want to throw some ideas back and forth. My number is 513-451-5000. You can text me, you can give me a call at any time. And I would love to help you if you're a real estate investor, especially if you're looking to buy your first property, either for a fix and flip, for a buy and hold strategy, a BRRRR. I've worked with many different types of real estate investors, evaluate multiple types of asset classes. Again, Chris Swain with Epic Realty, 513-451-5000. Please reach out if you need any help. Have a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.